was the Blueback Scholar. They're still #1 so far. Anybody else?
Catechism?
No, Catechism.
New England.
Has anybody heard of the New England Primer? Oh, fire up! Whoever got that. Oh, you've been to my talk, then. He's an inside guy, man. He's like going to shout out all that stuff. Yeah. New England Primer. Look at this. Over 6 million of these were printed and used between 1690 to the 1900s. This is before the age of modern printing presses. A phenomenal number of these things. Okay? Everyone, basically, when they learned how to read, they would go into first grade and they'd be given a New England Primer. So, look at this quote from the 1900 reprint. Contributed perhaps more than any other book except the... What's that doing there? Except the Bible, to the molding of those sturdy generations that gave to America its liberty, its freedom, and its institutions. Education, government, all these civil institutions. Well, isn't that interesting? Well, let's crack this book open and look at how they learned how to read. Here's how they learned how to read. They would have a little rhyming scheme. In A was, in Adam's fall, we sinned all. That's not too politically correct, is it? Look at B. Heaven to find, the Bible mind. C. Christ crucified, for sinners died. There's the gospel. This is in the public school system. Did you remember the 1900 reprint that these were being used? This is not just a short-term little phenomenon in the United States. This was throughout history until very recently that these concepts were being taught. This Christian foundation. Dr. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration. He said this: the only foundation for a useful education in a republic is to be laid in religion. Without religion, I believe that learning does real mischief to the morals and principles of mankind. All right, so that's Dr. Benjamin Rush. Now, I want to take a little rabbit trail here. They're throwing out, you've seen this word religion several times, right? Now, what does religion mean today? Webster's dictionary, religion is a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. Anything! Atheism is by definition, the Supreme Court has declared atheism a religion of secular humanism. It's a declared religion. Okay? No faith at all. And it talks about this. So wait, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about religion the way we define it today? No. Let's go back to Webster's 1828 dictionary. So whenever you see this word religion, keep this definition in mind. It's a belief in the being and perfections of God, in the revelation of His will to man, in man's obligation to obey His commands, and you can read on. It's a dramatically different definition than what we currently have, right? So let's get our semantics right. Okay, let's talk about what religion actually means. It's not a set of just amorphous beliefs. It's a set in a very theistic, biblical world and concept of God, correct? So whenever you see the term religion, this is the definition you should keep in mind. Look at Noah Webster. By the way, Noah Webster was an important founder and very influential in our education system of Webster's dictionary fame. So he came, and Webster also did the Blueback Scholar. So, watch what he said. The Christian religion is the most important and one of the first things in which all children under a free government ought to be instructed. No truth is more evident to my mind than that the Christian religion must be the basis of any government. Now, I just want to give a side note here. Every single quote I give you is a primary source quote backed up, referenced. And if you would like all the references, I can give them to you. I do not quote anything that we say, well, we think that Webster might have said something like this. I want to be above reproach in my scholarship as I'm doing this. I am not cherry picking. I am not coming up with, well, we think Webster might have said this. These are all documented things that Webster said. And I'm also not going to mislead you. For example, Thomas Jefferson was no fired-up evangelical Christian. Jefferson was one of the least religious of the founders, but he was no deist. He was a Christian. And I'll talk to you more about Jefferson in a moment. But finally, George Washington. Now, before I get to this quote, George Washington, the final quote on education, had some Delaware Native American chiefs came to President Washington and said, we want our youth educated in your American public school system. Washington said, you do well to wish to learn our arts and ways of life, and above all, the religion of Jesus Christ. Congress will do everything they can to assist you in this wise intention. What are they learning in the public school system? The religion of Jesus Christ. Who's going to assist them? Congress. And that doesn't violate the separation of church and state? No, it doesn't. Because the separation of church and state is not in any foundational document. Many of you know, what is the separation of church and state? You were here 2 weeks ago when I talked about this. What is it? What is that supposed to represent? The establishment. Boy, still, you got, come on! Raise your hand if you were here 2 weeks ago. Raise your hand. Oh, that's why. Okay, fire up. We got a whole... Raise your hand if you weren't here at Calvary Chapel during the sermon. Raise your hand if you guys are new. Oh, fire up.
I was in college.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for coming. Good. We got a lot of new people. So that's why. Okay, I thought we were like, most of you guys were here. So we're going to talk about the Establishment Clause a little bit more later. But so that's in schools. That's how Christianity was to influence the public school system. One more quote. Joseph Story, Supreme Court Justice. He's quoted in a Vidal 1844 decision. He says, why may not the Bible, and especially the New Testament, without note or comment be read and taught as divine revelation in the schools? Where can the purest principles of morality be learned so clearly or so perfectly as from the New Testament? That's as a Supreme Court Justice saying this from the bench. Isn't that amazing? All right, so Christianity played a foundational role. So, in education, now let's look at government. Maybe government was more secular from the start. Maybe schools were that way, but government is more. So we're going to look at what is the source of our rights, according to the founders. We're going to look at what did the Founding Fathers view as the foundation of the country's morality, and we're going to look at prayer. Was it integral in the nation's founding? First, what is the source of our rights? The Bill of Rights. Is it the Bill of Rights? No. What's our source of rights? The Constitution, right? Oh, it's we the people. Is it we the people that we all consent? Is that the source of our rights? Our source of rights are declared boldly in the Constitution. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They are saying, the Continental Congress is saying, this is obvious, right? That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. You can't take them away. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these rights, now I want to just clarify for a moment, these rights have nothing to do with our rights before God. In this declaration, the founders understood these rights were how we treat one another, right? So we're supposed to treat one another, right? How do we treat one another? If it's eye for an eye, right? No? How do we treat one another? Treat others the way you want to be treated, right? If you return blessing for cursing. We have a high calling, don't we? But these are the rights that God has given every single person on this planet. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if they're given by God, can they be taken away? Look, I want to make this point clear. This is a distinguishing characteristic in the United States government that set us apart from all the other governments of the world at that time. That our rights don't come from the king. Remember King George. Why did we declare independence? Because they were the king, governments, theocracies, whatever they had, were abusing people's rights. And so the founders understood that if we were indeed one nation under God, then the government is accountable to God for protecting our God-given rights. And it goes right, look at this. Here's Adams. Look at what Adams said. The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now look at this next quote. This is the preamble of the Declaration. when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Now, I have heard people say, oh, the laws of nature and nature's God. Well, that's got nothing to do with your evangelical Bible and your God. That's a very deistic concept. Really? Not so much. Actually, if you go in and research this language, now watch this. William Blackstone, sorry the print is so small, but I'll read it. But this is so good. William Blackstone was a brilliant legal scholar in England. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. Jefferson said that lawyers quote Blackstone like Muslims quote the Quran. He said literally that. Blackstone was hugely influential. In fact, Blackstone was the second most cited by the founders. The second most cited by the founders was William Blackstone. Watch what Blackstone does, and this is exactly where the Continental Congress and Jefferson got the language, the laws of nature and of nature's God. Watch what Blackstone says. Thus, when the Supreme Being formed the universe, he impressed certain principles upon that matter from which it can never depart and without which it would cease to be. This law of nature he's directly referring to in theological terms as general revelation. The heavens declare the glory of the Lord. They pour forth speech. Romans 1, for from the beginning of creation, right? God's hidden nature, his divine attributes have been clearly seen by what has been made. This is exactly what William Blackstone is talking about, the law of nature. We are without excuse. Even if the gospel is not preached to us, this is called general revelation. We're without excuse. Because we know by what's created, this law of nature. Now watch this. This law of nature being coexistent with mankind and dictated by God himself is of course superior in obligation to any other. Upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, that's the Bible, that's from Scripture, depend all human laws. Watch this. That is to say, no human laws should be permitted to contradict these. The Bible or general revelation. This is exactly where they get this terminology in the preamble of the Constitution. So please don't let anybody tell you, oh, the law of nature is some deistic thing. No, the law of nature is general revelation, and of nature's God is the Bible, is specific revelation. So these are very important terms in the Declaration, and the founders intended it to be so, quoting Blackstone there. All right. What else? Our morals and laws come from God. Look at this in 1639, the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Right? This is the first written constitution in America and an important precursor to our U.S. Constitution. It says, it is ordered, sentenced, and decreed that magistrates, rulers, and other public officers, governors, presidents, whatever, shall have power to administer justice according to the laws here established, and for want thereof, according to the rule of the Word of God. Oops. That's in a foundational document to the Constitution. This is where they get the law of nature and of nature's God. Are you with me? All right. So, Adams also said this, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Why? Because as soon as you yank this nation out from under God, as soon as you take the moral foundation of a Christian worldview and pull it out from the nation, no amount of laws are going to control people who are not motivated to be controlled from a force within, from the laws of the Bible and general revelation. When you yank the nation out from under God, moral free fall happens. Okay? Have we seen that the last 50 years?
Yep.
We're going to talk about more of that tomorrow morning. How has that happened and what are the results of that happening? And then finally, Jefferson. This is President Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter in 1809. He says, the practice of morality being necessary for the well-being of society, we all agree in the obligation of the moral precepts, teachings of Jesus. And nowhere will they be found delivered in greater purity than in his discourses. The 4 Gospels is exactly what Jefferson is referring to here. Now I want to be, again, I'm not going to mislead you. Jefferson was no fired-up evangelical. He struggled with the deity of Christ. He liked the teachings of Jesus. He liked the Gospels, but he thought that Paul's writings and Peter and others had gotten kind of corrupted over time. We can now prove that they haven't. Again, textual criticism, that's a whole other talk. I've got a seminar out there called Standing Firm, and that's a biblical worldview curriculum. But we're not going to go there right now. But my point is that Jefferson understood that the country's moral foundation was the teachings of Jesus. I'll talk more about Jefferson a little bit later. Well, that was as president. Look at the legislative branch. Okay, this is about 80 some odd years after the Declaration, after the formation of the country. They did a committee, and they said, what was the purpose of Christianity in America? They debated it! Seriously. In 1853, 1854, they debated what was the role Christianity was to play. They put, this is all documented. This is, you go look it up online. It's the Library of Congress. So watch this. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged. What? That's not neutral. No, it wasn't. And it was not intended to ever be neutral by the founders and for almost the first 200 years of this nation's existence. Christianity, the Christian worldview, was highlighted. You didn't have to believe Jesus to have full rights of an American citizen, but they absolutely valued the Christian worldview above any other faith. But watch this. Religion, must be considered as the foundation on which the whole structure rests. That was the religion of the founders of the Republic. You guys can read some of this stuff. There's a lot of controversial things in there, isn't there? That's from the legislative branch of our government. Stated this. What's the role of Christianity? It should be encouraged. And yet now, there's hostility towards it. It's not the way it was intended. Watch this. Maybe the judicial branch has been more hostile from the beginning. Huh? Let's go back to Joseph's story. Joseph's story is considered the father of our American legal system. Story says this: the promulgation of the great doctrines of religion, the being and attributes and providence of one Almighty God, the responsibility to Him for all our actions, these never can be a matter of indifference in a well-ordered community. Watch this. It is the especial duty of government to foster and encourage Christianity among all the citizens and subjects. And he said that not in some private letter. He said that from the bench as a Supreme Court justice. All 3 branches of government were in total agreement that a Christian worldview was to be the foundation of our nation. John Jay was the first Chief Justice. In 1816, he said, Providence has given our people the choice of their rulers. And it is their duty as well as privilege and interest of a Christian nation to select and prefer Christians, real Christians, not just one who claim to be Christian, but actually people who follow the teachings of Jesus, right? Prefer Christians for their rulers. He said that as justice, as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Not very politically correct, right? What's he saying there? That's wow. You get people like going, what? Wow, like flip out today, right? Someone said like that, right? But look at that. So why am I doing this? I'm attempting to build a case, and I'm not cherry picking. If you want resources, if you want big honking books with huge footnoting and tons of references, I can point you to all of them that back up. I'm scratching the tip of just the surface. Just the tip of the iceberg, just scratching the surface. So this is all foundational to the United States government and our institutions. So we looked at schools. We looked at government. Was prayer integral? Right? Prayer is kind of controversial, right? Well, you can't pray, in this place or here or there because that violates the separation of church state. Well, our nation was founded and sustained by prayer. Look at some of these quotes. First, I want to give you one of the least, well, not even arguably, but the least